My name is your name, and perhaps you've never heard of me. In fact, I guarantee you haven't, because I made sure of that. What I'm about to tell you completely changed my life. Not gradually, not like a soft transformation, but like a violent collapse followed by a silent rebirth. And maybe when I'm done, you'll understand why some stories need to be told from the shadows, far from the eyes of those who once pretended to know us. I grew up believing that my family would be my safe harbor, that they would always be there, even when I made mistakes, even when I failed. That childish, innocent belief, woven from whispered promises and occasional hugs, was a foundation on which I built my identity. But foundations built on illusion sustain nothing. They only postpone the inevitable collapse. Over the years, I began to notice small things, details that accumulated silently, like tiny cracks in an old wall that no one sees until it collapses all at once. Comments ignored when I spoke at the dinner table, as if my words dissolve in the air before reaching their ears. Laughter that seemed hidden, shared among them when I left the room, leaving behind an echo of something I didn't fully understand but that chilled me inside. Invitations that never arrived, birthdays, celebrations, family gatherings I only discovered afterward through social media photos where everyone smiled, united, complete, except for an absence no one seemed to notice. At first, I rationalized. They were just coincidences. I thought I was being overly sensitive, paranoid. But the human mind has that cruel ability to detect patterns, to connect dots we would rather leave isolated. And the more I observed, the clearer it became, they didn't just forget me. Sometimes it seemed like they ignored me on purpose. There was intention in that absence, a deliberate choice in every silence. I tried to get closer. I asked questions, attempted conversations, offered help, but it was like screaming into the vacuum of space. Sound simply doesn't travel where nothing exists to carry it. And slowly, methodically, I began to understand a devastating truth. To them, I was already a ghost, physically present, but absent in every way that truly matters. The breaking point came on a day that should have been memorable, my graduation. I had worked for years for that moment. Sleepless nights, sacrifices, doubts overcome. Every page turned, every completed test, every obstacle conquered, all building up to that moment when I would walk on stage and receive a diploma that represented not just a certificate, but a promise to myself that I was capable. I expected to see them in the audience. Not all of them. Perhaps I had already learned to lower my expectations. But someone, a familiar face among the crowd of strangers, pride in their eyes, maybe a smile, a simple gesture of recognition, a wave saying, "We see you, we're proud." It was so little to ask, absurdly little, but they didn't come. I sat among hundreds of graduates, all surrounded by vibrant families, by flowers and cameras and tight hugs. And I was alone, completely, irrevocably alone. When they called my name, I walked onto the stage in a silence only I could hear. There were no special applause for me, no cheering, only the procedural sound of the ceremony moving forward, indifferent to the black hole that had opened in my chest. And it wasn't forgetfulness. That was the part that hurt the most. It wasn't an accident. I found out later, through careless messages in family group chats I hadn't yet been removed from, that they all knew. The date was on the calendar. I had sent the invitation weeks earlier with every detail. They simply decided there were more important things to do that day. A barbecue, a soccer match on TV, everyday tasks that somehow outweighed the most significant milestone of my life so far. No one lifted a finger. No one cared enough to sacrifice a few hours, to be present, to show me that I mattered. It was as if in that moment, I finally received confirmation of what I had been suspecting for years. To them, I truly didn't exist. Not in any way that mattered. Not in the way a family is supposed to make someone exist. The ground opened beneath me, and I felt something I had never experienced so intensely. A silent, deep rage that burned without making a sound. A pain so sharp it almost became physical, a weight in my chest that made breathing difficult. But along with all that, strangely, came clarity. A crystalline understanding I had never felt before. I didn't need them. More than that, I didn't want them anymore. That night, alone in my room, the diploma thrown onto the table like a trophy without an audience. I made a decision. It wasn't impulsive. It was calculated, cold, definitive. If they wanted me to be invisible, then I would become completely imperceptible, but not out of weakness, out of choice. I could have stayed and begged. I could have confronted them, demanded explanations, sought the dramatic showdown that might have given me some momentary satisfaction. I could have surrendered to resentment and sadness, letting that moment define the rest of my life as a permanent victim of their neglect. But deep down, I knew that wasn't what I deserved. If they didn't see me, then maybe it was time for me to become someone who truly existed for myself. Someone who didn't need the approval of those who were supposed to love me unconditionally. Someone who didn't beg for scraps of affection from people who had shown repeatedly that they had nothing to offer. And so I decided my life would change forever. The preparations took months, not because they were complicated. Technically, erasing yourself is surprisingly easy in the modern world, but because I needed certainty. Certainty that this was what I wanted. Certainty that there would be no going back. And each passing day, watching that family continue their lives as if I were just a forgotten piece of furniture in a corner, my certainty solidified. I changed my name. Not legally, not at first. That came later. But I started introducing myself differently, responding to another name, building a new identity layer by layer. It was liberating and terrifying at the same time, like peeling off your own skin to see what lies underneath. I erased every trace of who I was to them. I changed phone numbers without warning, deleted every social media profile where they might find me. I created new profiles with new names, new photos, new stories. I left behind everything that could tie me to a past that had rejected me. Old photos, gifts I had kept, letters, memories. Everything went to the trash or to the fire, purified through destruction. It was like being born again, but with all memories intact, with all the pain converted into fuel. It wasn't forgetting, it was transcendence. I carried everything that had happened with me, but now as lessons, as scars that reminded me to never again allow someone to make me feel invisible. I moved to a different city, not too far. There was something poetically satisfying in knowing that I was still close, that we could cross paths on the street and they wouldn't recognize me. I started building a new life quietly, in calculated anonymity. New job, new friends, new routines. I learned to trust only myself and the few people I carefully chose to keep around. People who proved, through actions and not empty words, that they truly saw me. There were moments, of course, when the longing tightened in my chest. Not longing for them specifically, but longing for the idea of them. Longing for the family I imagined having as a child, that fantasy of belonging we all carry with us. Moments when anger tried to consume me, when I want to call, confront, make them feel even a fraction of what they made me feel. Moments when the loneliness seemed unbearable, when I woke up in the middle of the night, and for a second forgot that I had erased my past, and the weight of absence fell on me like an avalanche. But every time I thought about going back, about looking for any sign of them, about trying to rekindle something that never truly existed, I remembered. I remembered the silence at my graduation, the hidden laughter, the invitations that never came. And I realized there was no love waiting for me in that direction. There was only the memory of closed doors, intentional silences, people who never believed in me and never would. And so I moved on, step by step, day by day, rebuilding my story like a solitary architect, raising a cathedral in the desert, discovering that freedom had a bitter taste, yes, but also a powerful one. That chosen solitude was infinitely preferable to company that diminished you, that I was capable of far more than they ever imagined, than I ever imagined. Today, years later, I look back and see that everything that happened shaped me in ways I could never have predicted. The family that ignored me didn't destroy me. They forced me to discover a strength within myself that I had never needed to fully access. The courage to disappear and be reborn in a world I chose, built, defined. I hold no resentment. Resentment corrodes, turns you into what hurt you, and I refuse to let them have that power over me. But I keep the memory as a silent warning, as a compass that guides me in the relationships I build now. Sometimes, to be truly seen, you need to disappear from those who pretend to see you. And that is exactly what I did. I am no longer the person who waited for applause at graduation. That person died in that silent auditorium. And what rose from the ashes was someone who learned to value themselves, who learned to exist on their own, who discovered that solitude can be a field of liberation when the world you knew refuses to acknowledge who you are. And if someday they realize they lost me, that they forgot me, that they let slip away someone who could have been important in their lives, there will be nothing they can do, because I no longer belong to that world. That version of me was buried along with every unmet expectation, every accumulated disappointment, every moment of forced invisibility. I belong to myself now, and that finally is enough. But there is something I haven't told yet, something I've kept hidden until this moment, because it is the part that changes everything. The reason I am sharing this story now, after so much time hiding in the shadows, because, you see, a few weeks ago, something happened, something I didn't expect, something that made me question whether the disappearance was truly complete, or if it was only the beginning of something much bigger, much more disturbing. And when you know what it was, you'll understand why some stories don't have happy endings. They only have silences that hide secrets that perhaps should never be uncovered. But that is a story for another time. For now, just know this. I disappeared. And what I found in my disappearance was something they could never imagine.